we've established
No.
I am the biggest Isabella Marcet shill that there is. Her and Tom Holland are like up there for me.
So in the theaters this week, we got the final trailer for Fantastic Four, which is finally now playing in theaters. And my friend leaned over to me during Superman and told me something that I don't believe in at all. I quite hate him for saying it. And that's the fact that he thinks Pedro Pascal is completely overrated. Brandon, thoughts?
Them some fighting words.
Them some fighting words.
You know what's really funny? So we still haven't technically determined what next week's episode is going to be about because there's a little bit of a lull between Fantastic Four and now. What I was going to propose to you and what I forgot to do before we started this episode was Pedro Pascal's new movie Eddington comes out next week. Or I guess technically later this week, whatever. And I was going to propose that because I was like, oh, we both love Pedro Pascal. We can watch the Pedro Pascal movie. So to hear, I can only guess who said this out of our mutuals that I know you saw the movie with, and them some fighting words. He better
Nah.
Look,
I
will
wanted to
say,
fight in the theater.
He's not the best thing since sliced bread. He's not the best actor ever. He's definitely I think the reason people think that is because they feel he's been in so many things recently, which is true. That is objectively true. That is what happens
It's very
with
true.
every actor who becomes insanely popular like Pedro Pascal has. But also, he is just a good actor. Of course, you're going to cast him in a bunch of things. I mean, Robert Downey Jr. Even after Iron Man, was in quite a few things. Benedict Cumberbatch has been in a lot of things. I don't consider either of them overrated. Like, I don't get this argument of like an actor being overrated if they are still a good actor just because they're in a lot of things.
Well,
If they're
in
a lot of things and they're a bad actor, which there are examples of, okay, overrated. There are some actors I think are overrated, but like another one that came up, that was a popular conversation a while ago was Timothée Chalamet. With Timothée Chalamet being an overrated actor, I like Timothée Chalamet. Do I think he's the best thing since sliced bread? No, but again, I think he is an objectively good actor for what he does. And yes, he's in a lot of things, but that's because he's good.
When people get hype behind an actor, and when people fall for an actor, it's easier to put them in a bunch of roles. For Timothée Chalamet, I think it was Interstellar was like when they finally like really fell in love with Chalamet. And since then he's been in constantly everything, and now he's in, one of the most popular franchises of the modern day with Dune. I'm trying to think of other stuff he's done.
Wonka's a big one.
Wonka was a big one, in which you're just like, why Timothée Chalamet? If it was Tom Holland in his exact place, Tom Holland could be considered that because he was also Spider-Man, and now he's going to be in the Odyssey. It just depends on
another one that I've heard people call overrated as well, and I just don't get it. Now, granted, I'm the biggest Tom Holland shill that ever existed, but that's neither here nor there.
Well, and like I'm not comparing but Tom Holland and Timothée Chalamet are on very different tracks. Tom Holland has definitely had some misses. Timothée Chalamet has only really had one miss in my mind that I know of. Every other movie he's done has at least been positive, or at least only one of his films has actually been negative, and that was Don't Look Up, which I also did not like that movie that much. He was good in it. I really didn't like that movie though. And we talked about Pedro Pascal specifically. Pedro Pascal, well, it wasn't his first role, but his first big breakout role was Oberyn Martell in Game of Thrones. He's not in the series that long, but he plays more of a bit character. But he's so impactful that people loved him as an actor and wanted to keep coming back. Thus, we got him as Mando. And even though he's more likely than not even in the suit, it's just his voice. He became immensely popular because of Mandalorian, and then Joel, and now Mr. Fantastic, which I think is kind of like the one thing in the straw for people, because here's where I think the hate's coming for Pedro Pascal, because he is a phenomenal actor. Comedy, drama, all of it. I love him as an actor. He is one of my favorites for a reason. That being said, I think Mr. Fantastic was like a nail in the coffin for everybody, purely because either you don't like Pedro Pascal, so you don't want to see him be a lead in Fantastic Four, or you just don't like Pedro Pascal as the role for Mr. Fantastic because he either doesn't look
Mhm.
like the role, or he doesn't fit the role, or this or that, and it just creates a confusion, mess, and blob of how the public perceives Pedro as an actor. I personally don't
Yeah.
think he's overrated. I understand where people are coming from when they say that, and I certainly won't argue that completely. Will I punch you in the face maybe once or twice? Sure, that might happen. It very well could happen. Uh, but like again, specifically with Joel and Last of Us, like even though season two wasn't the most picture perfect thing, his performance in that second season is wonderful. I would
Yeah. Oh,
not
yeah.
be surprised if he still wins an Emmy for playing that role uh, in the upcoming Emmy season. I wouldn't be surprised. That being said, again, it's just the public perception of how they view him. And I'm only talking about that purely because when my friend said it the other day, I was like, oh my God, don't say that. That's not, no, dude. Don't
Well,
boycott Fantastic Four because of that.
and I think here's the thing. There's one other thing I'll say to this before we move into the main topic, and that is Pedro Pascal is a very interesting actor in terms of his pedigree. And I brought up examples such as Robert Downey Jr. or Benedict Cumberbatch. Now, I guess Benedict Cumberbatch is a little bit of a weird one because, yes, he has done TV, but he's mainly known for movies.
Sure.
Robert Downey Jr. is mainly a movie actor. I can't even name a
Yes.
single TV show that he's been in. Pedro Pascal arguably has done just as much TV as he has movies. Think of
Yeah.
Narcos. Narcos is a really big one that also showed him
Narcos.
to fame. That's a big
Yep.
one. The Last of Us. But he also and Mandalorian. But then you also have his movies. Like you have what is it, The Unbearable Weight of Fame or something like that with
Massive talent. Goated movie. Great movie.
yes.
Please watch that, Brandon.
Yes. You have his movies, like, obviously, with the upcoming Fantastic Four, and not a lot of actors I feel like more in the modern age than in previous years, have been moving to doing TV and movies, but Pedro Pascal, I think that's why people might view him as overrated because he is in if you were only doing movies, it is very difficult to do a ton of movies. If you're only in TV, it's very difficult to do a ton of TV. But because of the style of roles that he picks in TV, with Joel from The Last of Us, where season two he was barely in it, but he still played a pivotal role. With
Correct.
Mandalorian, like you said, 99% of the time it's just his voice. He can go into a recording booth, record that, and call it a day. He is
Sure.
able to pump out more content and do both of them. So he is doing, I guess, again, more than most actors, which by default, unfortunately, people view as being overrated, which I think is ridiculous.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I agree with you. Look, because again, I love him in almost everything he does because he's either like really funny or he's really really dramatic and really good with that too. And honestly, Unbearable Weight of Massive Talent is like a really good example of that because he gets to play with both. Like he gets to play this guy who's in love with Nick Cage, loves Nick Cage, as just a film star, and he creates some really comedic moments. But then at its core, his character has a really big heart. And you do
Mhm.
see that come through in the movie. That's why I really love that movie, and it honestly might have been my favorite of 2022 when it came out because it was really, really well done. And his arc is very, very good too. Um, but it's just I don't know that I wanted to talk about that because I'm just like, come on, dude, he's not that overrated. I understand the public perception of things, but come on, dude, he's not that overrated. Um, but I think enough talking about Pedro Pascal. We'll talk about him in 2 weeks or potentially next week. Uh, which is a very good chance because I love me some Pedro Pascal, and that movie looks good. Uh, but that being said, let's just jump into it. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, come one, come all, welcome back to the Nerdy Nimrods podcast, the only podcast in the world where your two favorite Nimrods talk all things nerdy. I am one of your hosts this evening, Carson, aka Juggernaut, here with my forever co-host.
Brandon, aka Parrotfish.
And today, the day is here. The day has come. We are talking about Superman 2025. I have to specify that because there are other films named Superman.
Yes. Yes. Specifically,
But
David Corn Sweat's Superman.
James Gunn's, you really could throw any actor's name out there and they'll know which Superman you're talking about.
Yes.
Um,
Yes.
but before we deep dive into our thoughts about this film, Brandon, how we feeling? How we doing? How was your week?
It's been a good week. I mean, not a perfect week, but I can't complain over. I do have one thing to complain about, and that is the fact that I think I've established on the podcast before. I live in the DMV area. If you don't know what the DMV is, it's DC, Maryland, Virginia. It's that kind of little square, circle, triangle, whatever you want to call it, of area. And I don't have a car, so I rely on the metro system. Well, the metro system on Thursdays is supposed to close at midnight. Reason I'm bringing this up is only showing of Superman. The only showing of Superman on Thursday in IMAX was 9:15. I got out of this movie. I actually missed the second end credit scene. I watched it later on a leak on YouTube. Not that I really missed much. Um Later on because I had to leave the theater because it got out so late. I literally
Yeah.
ran to the metro, get to the metro. I have 10 minutes before the metro is supposed to close. The sign says there are still metros running. The gate has closed off the stairs, and a lady comes out and is like, "Hey, the metro's closed." And I turn to her, and I'm just dumbfounded. I'm like, "What do you mean the metro?" I literally point to the sign that says there's metros coming, and was like, "Huh?" I had to Uber home from the movies. I had to pay like $25 to Uber home because and here's the thing that pisses me off the most, and the reason I wanted to rant about this. I was sitting at the metro stop waiting on my Uber. I could hear metros going by above me. There were what do you mean there's no more metros? I could hear them stopping above me. I am gonna run into the same exact problem when I see Fantastic Four. But again, my theater sucks. So the only showing of Fantastic Four, it's not 9:15, it's 9, and Fantastic Four is about I think 20 minutes less time. I think Superman was about 2 hours and 10, 2 hours and 15 minutes. Fantastic Four is 1 hour and 55 minutes. So it gives me like 30 minutes extra of buffer time in total to get to the metro. If I run into this problem again, I'm just gonna walk home. It's a 2-hour walk, but Ubers are expensive, man, and I'm not made of money. And that damn
Yeah.
lady at the stupid metro stop, there's no more metro. I'm so I wasn't sure if I was gonna rant
I
about
hear
this
them
on
going
the podcast,
by.
but I had to because you asked me how I was, and I was like, I'm doing great. It was a great week, other than that one. Mm,
I
mm,
just need I need clarification here. This little incident is in no way affecting your mindset about the movie of Superman, is it?
no,
I just want to
no,
make sure. Okay, we're
it's
good. We're good. Otherwise, that
no.
would be
Because here's the
completely.
thing. If you want me to rant more, I can because the DMV metro system also has a bus system, and they shut down my bus route to get into the office. So I had a whole issue getting into the office this week because they shut down my entire. I'm gonna stop here because it's supposed to be a happy podcast where we talk about the things we love and talk about Superman, and not for Brandon to rant about how stupid the DMV metro system is. So
Uh,
Carson, how's your week
the
been? How have you been
this
doing?
is this is no longer the nerdy Nimrods podcast. This is the thirsty therapist podcast where
This
I
is
help Brandon
this
through
is
his
the
problems with the
this
metro.
is the Brandon crashes out for 30 minutes podcast.
Oh God, the amount of views we'd probably get from that too. Just one person yelling into a mic while I'm just bobbing my head. Yes, I see.
Mm,
Yes, I
mm,
hear you. Yes.
yes, yes.
No, dude, it's been a very, very solid week. I look. I worked the first half of the week, and I got the second half of the week off. So I've been helping, prep a house for people to move into. I've been doing all that, trying to watch the dogs, make sure they're all good. I tried a lot of new recipes this week though for just food. I just threw random stuff together and somehow it worked. Whether my folks would agree, they didn't eat any of it, is yet to be seen. It could just be me. But very, very fun. Had some experiments. Again, when I went to watch Superman, I went with a couple friends this week, and one of which is just a massive Superman fan. even more so than just you know I think I ever could be. I'm a fan of DC. Don't get me wrong. He is a Superman fan. Like he has Steel books and Smallville box sets. I was so excited to get to watch it with him because I knew he would just love every second of it. Um, but yeah, no, I had fun watching this movie in theaters. That was like the highlight of my week was getting to do that with everybody. But I'm good. Before we deep dive in this and I give it to you, spoilers for everything we talk about today.
Yes.
Um, I'm being completely serious here. Even though this is actually one of those superhero films, I really don't feel like there's like much to spoil. Thankfully, like there's not big mind blowing things. It's just like the plot, some things they do with the characters. But we are deep diving into almost everything. We are going to riff on this movie for a while and it's going to be filled with spoilers. So if you do not care for spoilers, stay on. Yeah, that's fine, even though you really shouldn't. And if you care for spoilers, please log off immediately. This is your
Yes. Go
warning.
watch this movie and come back.
Enter with caution. That being said, Brandon, you have been very secretive about your thoughts for this film. You have given me nothing. You even
Mhm.
refused to watch my 3 minute short when you posted it. You heard three
Yes.
words, and that was
Mhm.
it. Brandon, please give me your first initial thoughts on James Gunn's Superman.
So this is going to be an interesting one to talk about. I'm going to go crisscross applesauce for this. I've been thinking a lot. I got into the Uber. Actually, the reason I told the Uber story and the reason I told decided to bring up the Uber story is because it actually does play into my thoughts, but not in a negative way. Um, it's I got into the Uber and the Uber driver was like, "Oh, how was the movie?" Because clearly he's picking me up from the theater. He knows I just saw a movie, and I'm
Sure.
like, I was like, "Oh, I just saw the new Superman movie." And he asked me again, like he said, "Oh, how was it?" And what I told him was, "This is a movie that I'm going to need to think about what my thoughts are and kind of collect myself because I really enjoyed this movie. However, I do think that it is a flawed movie. I think this movie, the best way that I could put it, and this is kind of how I conceptualized my thoughts, is this movie is everything it needed to be the first movie in the DC universe to catch people's attention, to get them hooked, and to sell them on what James Gunn is doing. However, I don't think it was much more than that. I have a lot of positives to say. I have negatives to say. I think that walking into this, my hopes were that we were going to get a really fun Superman movie, and we got that. However, my fear was that they were going to try and do too much and put too many things into one movie.
Mm.
And to a certain extent, I did walk out feeling that. I think that there were some things that were underutilized in certain aspects and things that were overutilized in certain aspects because of the way that this movie was framed. What the biggest compliment though, and I'll end off my thoughts on this to pass it off to Carson. The biggest compliment I can give this movie is this is the most comic book feeling movie I have ever watched. And again, that is what leans into the negatives of a comic book and the positives of a comic book, and why I don't think it's a perfect movie because it falls into some of those pitfalls of what telling a story in a comic book medium is. That is where I will end my thoughts. I am going to have a lot more to say about this movie. Trust me, I will give all of my thoughts in detail, but I'm going to go ahead and pass it over to Carson cuz I also don't know how you feel about this movie.
Yeah, so I loved this movie. I really liked everything James Gunn did with this. This is the best Superman movie that has ever been made, that has ever been released. It has problems. I'm not saying it's 100% perfect, but I don't think, rare exception, is there ever a movie that's 100% perfect.
Yeah, obviously.
I love that it doesn't give you a chance to breathe. I love that every second of this movie you are tense and that there's something that is being thrown at you constantly, whether it's fantastic dialogue, cinematography, the story itself. David Cornsweet as Superman is brilliant. Rachel Brosnan as Lois Lane is brilliant. Them together, I wanted more of that because every time they were in a scene together, it was not just well acted, it was so well written. I believed the relationship that these two have. Every step of the way, I believed it. Nicholas Hoult, it makes me so happy when we went to his panel because he is the best DC villain I've ever seen. Even more than Joaquin Phoenix's Joker, maybe more than Heath Ledger's Joker. He fits
I
the
was
role
gonna say
so
Joaquin
well.
Phoenix's Joker I'll take, but over Heath Ledger's Joker,
Maybe
that's
not Heath Ledger. That's the only exception. Nicholas Hoult plays Lex Luthor perfectly and brings this character to life in a way that, uh, rest in peace, Gene Hackman. Even Gene Hackman never did. This is a Lex Luthor that you hate, you
Mhm.
actively despise. And they hit that so on the money, so perfectly. His own ego over the safety of other people. And it was so well done. Crypto, just the most adorable thing ever. The Justice Gang, whereas I have a few complaints with them, didn't feel like they overloaded the movie. If anything, they pushed the plot along to the perfect amount because it's really set. The thing I love about this as a whole is that this isn't just another origin story for Superman. We're already in this world. We don't need that origin story. We're thrusted into it immediately. Like I said, you don't get a chance to breathe, and you constantly are uh, blown away by new concept and new story because we don't have to stick to that old origin story, that we don't have to continue telling the same thing that we've been telling for over 40 years at this point. James Gunn knew the assignment and he did it absolutely right. That being said, I will say this because I've had time to think about this. Even though this is definitely not the most James Gunn movie, it's obviously not better than that first Guardians movie. I love Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 1. I also don't think it's better than the Suicide Squad, but granted, I'm one of the people who really loves the Suicide Squad. I honestly still think it's competition for Guardians for me. I really love that Suicide Squad movie. Peacemaker, is good, but yeah, I'll give Superman this. It's better than Peacemaker, but Peacemaker is a very different type of show.
Yeah.
It's a very different type of show. James Gunn knocked it out of the park. And the thing that I loved about his directing style this time is that it doesn't feel like Guardians. It doesn't feel like Suicide Squad. It is its own
Mhm.
entity. He knew when to not tell a joke to give character work. Wrapping up my thoughts before we start from the beginning and we go all the way through, I had very little negatives, and if they were negative, they were minor things of more, oh, I wish they could have done this. But it's not like I hated the thing that they did. I just wish they could have done this. Um, Also, it's not a multiverse movie. Good job, DC, for not doing a multiverse movie. We saw what happened with
Yeah.
The Flash. Thank you for not doing it this time.
Yeah.
Let's start with the beginning. It literally thrusts you into it with a Star Wars title crawl. And I didn't really have a problem with that, especially because, again, it's the story of Superman. I actually like the way they did it, where they went in like 300 years, 30 years, 3
Mhm.
years, uh, uh, 3 hours ago, 30 minutes ago, however, what time it was. I don't even fully remember.
Yeah.
Um, they did a really good job of sucking you into it. And then the thing I love about this opening shot, even though I actually, here's what I will say, and you can tell me if you agree or disagree. It took me a hot second to get into this because it doesn't give you a second to breathe, and it does just throw you right into the action. Like you don't really
Mhm.
feel like you get a proper like build into it. It just goes for it.
Yeah.
So it took me like a solid like 10, 20 minutes until that first Clark and Lois scene to actually get into it. But what I love about this shot and something specifically, because the whole movie is trying to tell the story of Clark Kent, not so much Superman. It's the idea that we open with a defeated Superman. We open with a Superman who's lying on the ground, beaten, bloody. You know, I actually really appreciated that and really loved that they decided to start with that because Superman is seen as a god. To a certain extent, he is. Um, And so getting the opportunity to open this film with uh, uh, an idea of, okay, even he can fail, is a great note to start on, because then where's the movie going to go? Anyway, go
Yeah,
ahead.
so I have a lot of thoughts on this opening. So you're right on the money with the it took me a little bit to get into this. I did enjoy the title crawl style thing.
Yeah,
Um I wasn't a big fan of how exposition heavy the robots felt. If you remember in the beginning of the movie, we after Superman is defeated and we have the whole crypto thing, which all that's ripped from the trailer. In fact, a lot of the trailers just rip from these first 15 minutes of the movie, which is we talked about this before about how to make a trailer. That's how to make a trailer because it really doesn't give you much. Granted, there are a lot of things, especially in the later trailers, that pull from the ending of the movie, but
sure.
especially that first trailer, it is just this stuff. Um, but I when Superman goes into the Fortress of Solitude and the robots, I wasn't the biggest fan of and maybe it's just because again, this movie doesn't give you a second to breathe and just kind of throws things at you. And this was my adjustment period to be like, okay, we're in this world. We had the whole line of dialogue where I guess Gary, earlier number 4, was teaching the new robot, which I believe was number 11. Like, oh, let's put on Superman's favorite recording, and my cat is getting on my computer. Let's put on Superman's favorite recording of his parents, and explaining how, like, it felt it didn't feel natural to me, it felt exposition heavy to me, and I think that immediately started it off on a not as high of a note as I would have wanted to, but then once Superman is recovered and he flies out and fights the Hammer of Baravia, you're back
Yeah,
in and you're get introduced to Lex Luthor for the first time and the style of villain that he is, that's when I started to be like, "Okay, I'm more into this now."
yeah,
Um, Another thing I'll say, and this is a comment that I might mention multiple times because it's just a general thing with the movie. I am very, very torn on how weak they made Superman. Look, I have had a lot of problems with Superman in the past because of him being so insanely powerful. That is one of my biggest things that has kept Superman from my top superhero slots, just because a lot of tellings of him, he can rewind time. He can, and I'm talking mainly in movies, not necessarily in comics, because comics has its own way of dealing with this. But you have him rewinding time, you have him being insanely powerful and never being defeated. I like having a Superman that can be defeated and does feel weak because it is necessary for the themes that they have in this story. However, for him to be defeated by supposedly the Hammer of Baravia. Now, granted, it makes a lot more sense later when you find out who the Hammer of Baravia is,
sure.
that starting on that note, I was like, okay, they're trying to make Superman a little too weak. And I think retrospectively, I can appreciate it more knowing who is in that suit. But
Yes,
starting with that, I was a little bit like, okay, I feel like I'm afraid they're going to overcorrect here with people's complaints about Superman being too powerful, if that makes sense.
sure. Well, I think the line that James Gunn kind of had to like find was, where's the line between a Christopher Reeve Superman where it's ping pow pop,
Yeah,
punches him and he goes flying across the map, but doesn't Man of Steel devastate the entire friggin' city? And
yeah.
he had to find that line, and I actually think he did that really well. I'll agree with you though. When Ultraman or Hammer, however you want to call him, I know he's Hammer of Bravia in that moment.
Well, he's
But
Ultraman. He's the Hammer of Bravia now, later.
right,
Which again,
later
talking about
Ultraman.
spoilers, we can just say it. We don't have to worry about it. Like it is Ultraman in that suit, so him being defeated by the Hammer of Bravia, which mind you is a real comic book character that is not Ultraman.
Right.
Um,
Yeah.
so
Which I think that again in that moment watching it, I was taken aback by it because I immediately thought,
mhm,
okay, so there must be some sort of kryptonited thing. Oh no, no nothing kryptonited. No, so that he just managed to defeat Superman, knowing that under under the hammer bravia, under the Ultraman suit, is a clone of dear old Clark Kent.
Yeah.
It kind of made me appreciate that opening more
Mhm.
because that incites the mystery of how was he actually able to defeat him. Um, and I'm actually not mad at that at all. After knowing all that, I can actually rewatch
Yeah.
it. However, I understand like first time viewers might see that as a he's too weak, he can't even stop him. No, that makes more sense now because it's a clone. Um,
Yeah.
so in my mind, I think that point is just kind of squashed because of that. Now that it's very
Yeah, I mean, I
obvious.
think I think that's fair. Again, I think retrospectively, and I do wish that I had seen this movie twice before doing this podcast. I'm actually seeing it again tomorrow, and I know you are as well. I
Yeah,
just could not get out to see it yesterday, unfortunately. But retrospectively, I think it makes a lot more sense. And I guess you can say the whole thing of like, oh well, it leans into the mystery of how was he defeated by the Hammer Brave. Yeah, I understand that, and if you have that thought and you enjoy that scene because of that, I have no problem with that. I think that is a very valid way to feel. I'm just saying for me personally, starting on that note,
sure.
especially, and I think this might be why, again, already having to take time to get into the movie and taking that 15-minute beat of we're not stopping, we're throwing, not only are we being thrown into a pre-established world, we are being thrown into a pre-established conflict and having to be exposition dumped to catch up on that conflict, which I think again it's really funny with this movie, and I don't want to beat on this point too much over the course because it's probably going to come up again. A lot of the things that I love about this movie also play into things that I don't like about this movie. And one of those being, I love how we are for the first time in superheroes almost feel like we are truly thrown into a fully established world. They are not holding your hand.
Yes.
They are not giving you another origin story. They are throwing you into a pre-established world. I love that is one of my favorite parts about this movie, in fact. I am so happy we did not get another origin story, we didn't get another building up the world, no. We have had a history of heroes for hundreds of years. We
Right.
have the Justice Gang, we have all these things.
Right.
However, I am not the biggest fan of being thrown directly into a pre-established conflict that we are then having to be exposition dumped on. I wish that they had done that a little differently because again, it does feel like you are starting in act 2 of a movie instead of starting in act 1 of a movie.
So I hear that complaint, and I don't agree with that. And I'm actually going to pull an example, and you could tell me to piss
Okay.
off with this example because you love this movie, and I'm
We'll
going to tell
see.
you that it does the exact same thing. And that movie is 1977's Star Wars. It does the exact same thing. It gives you exposition on a previous conflict and thrusts you into the world immediately. Superman does the same thing. I'll give you this. I do think Star Wars does it better.
Mhm.
But granted, it's also unfair because you and I have grown up with Star Wars for so long. It's an unfair comparison,
Yeah.
especially with this movie being so new. We could look 10 years down the road now that this film's been around for so long, and we could say, oh no, it's about the same. But Star Wars basically does the exact same thing. Um,
And I think that's fair. I do think that is fair. I'll get that out there, and I hadn't really thought about it that way. I do think that's fair. I still think for the story that they are trying to tell, again, it was really just because it took me so long to get into this movie, and I'm so curious to see how I feel about it on second watching.
sure,
Um, because then I already have all I will I still think that the exposition dumping is heavy? Will I feel like it's worse? Will I feel like it matters less? Now that I already have all of the context that I need to have going into this. Because you're right.
sure,
With Star Wars, I mean, I watched A New Hope as my first Star Wars movie, so I didn't watch even though the prequels had already come out by the time I was born, I still started in release order
sure.
of Star Wars when my dad and my grandmother introduced me to the movies. So I think that is a valid counterpoint to that argument. I still think that speaking in terms of in the theater experience, that's where my
Yes.
headspace was at.
No, and I'll give you that. Like that's not entirely wrong. Actually, it's not wrong at all. It's an opinion. So, um, you brought up the Justice Gang, and I kind of want to talk about them because let's just start with my negative quickly. Look, Nathan Fillion's really funny. Mr. Terrific was done very, very well. Those two characters, I'm mostly fine with. They played their part. Guy Gardner's an arrogant asshole who, comes in, says a quip, doesn't want to help, this, that. Mr. Terrific wants to help, smart guy, did it. Isabella Merced, fresh off of Last of Us Season 2. They paid her to be in this movie, and she has maybe one line of dialogue where I'm like, that's really good. I like that. I'm glad they did that. And then the rest of the movie, she screams.
Yeah,
That's what she
I
does the rest of the movie. So,
I think having her in this movie, she was very underutilized, but I didn't have as big of a problem with it. Again, we've established I
no,
am the biggest Isabella Marcet shill that there is. Her and Tom Holland are like up there for me.
sure.
I I think that Isabella Marcet did the best that she was given. She just wasn't given a bunch, but she didn't need to be because this isn't the
No.
Hawk Girl movie. This isn't the Justice Gang movie. These are just pre established characters to further the plot along and help establish, I guess, how established this world is in
Yeah.
having heroes that are already there that clearly as we find out, they already know who Clark Kent Superman is, that they already know each other. They're already
Yes.
friends is a stretch, I guess, but they're already pre-established relationship.
Yes.
To me, it didn't feel as egregious. And now I want to hit on another point that you kind of touched on in the beginning and you touched on a little bit here, so I'm going to go ahead and bring it up. I think that this is the best cast Superman movie ever. I think this is
Oh
the
yeah.
best cast
Oh man.
DC movie ever. I think this is one of, I'm not going to say the, but one of, actually, I will say this. I think overall, in terms of every character, not just the main character, because I think there are arguments to be made for other main characters being better cast than
Sure.
um David Cornsweet, even though I think he makes a phenomenal Superman. I'm talking in terms of every superhero movie. I think as a holistic cast, this is the best cast superhero movie of all time. And
Yeah.
maybe my opinion will change on that. We haven't seen Fantastic Four yet. I think as a cast as a whole, as an ensemble, as a main cast, I loved every single character, the way
Yeah.
that they were acted, the person. Mr. Terrific was a huge delight for me. I loved him so he shined so bright in what little he had in this movie.
Yes.
Nathan Fillion, I love Nathan Fillion. I don't think there's a human on earth who doesn't like
Yeah.
Nathan
Who
Fillion.
doesn't love
He's
Nathan Fillion?
he's
I love
phenomenal.
Nathan Fillion.
Him as Guy Gardner, phenomenal casting. It
Yeah.
was there ever dude I'm gonna pull this up really quickly because I'm being a very big stupid right now and I need to pull this up. Skylar Gisondo. I did not know that was his name, so I'm glad I looked it up. As
Yeah.
Jimmy
You're talking about it.
Olsen,
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
as Jimmy Olsen, utter perfection. He
They
plays
did Jimmy Olsen
very
so right.
very different Jimmy Olsen that I have seen before. Again,
Right.
I'm not the biggest Superman fan, so I haven't read all of his comics. Maybe this is a stereotypical for recent Jimmy Olsen, but Jimmy Olsen being the Rizzler and having just the biggest game you've ever seen and having him be awkward about it and not know how to handle it, utter perfection.
Perfect.
I
Jimmy.
loved it.
Yeah.
I have a lot of, again, I I was a bit negative in the start, but I did start out by saying I thought this was a great movie. One of the things
Yeah.
that makes me believe that this is a great movie is the casting. I think
Yes.
that James Gunn is a winner. And I mean, we already seen that with The Suicide Squad. The Suicide Squad
Right.
was a phenomenally cast movie. And it gives
Yes.
me so much faith for every other casting that James Gunn is involved in with this DCU. Even if he
Yeah.
casts someone and I'm like, that's a little weird, I'm here for it because he
I
killed
get.
it with
Yeah.
this movie.
You have me. I'm trying to think because like I know talking about Guy Gardner again. because I read something about what Nathan Fillion said about lanterns and about how
Yeah,
like he's
how he
dropping
gets to
f
curse a
bombs.
bunch and
Oh,
he yeah.
right, like it's the most whatever. Like, okay, that's very Guy Gardner. That makes sense. I forgot
Mhm.
Lanterns was actually going to be an R-rated project.
It's a
I
TV series,
complete
so I think it's
yes,
a TVMA, yeah.
I completely forgot about that. But
I also
I'm bringing that up specifically because you're talking about casting Kyle Chandler as Hal Jordan, and I don't remember who the other guy is, but I remember recognizing him and going, "Oh no, that's perfect for Jon Stewart." And again, another project that James Gunn's working on, similar to Superman, where it's going to thrust you into the world immediately. You're not going to get much
Mhm.
of an exposition of beyond. Okay, maybe you might want to give a little bit of a definition beyond, like, oh, these are the Green Lanterns. This is what the
Yeah.
rings mean. You might want to
I mean,
do that.
it'll probably do something very similar to this movie, if I had to guess, where it'll start out with the establishing either
Yes.
crawl or whatever, throw you into something, and then over the course of the show or the movie, you'll build up and get more context, which is a
Yes.
very interesting direction of storytelling because that's not how the DCU started. That is not
No.
how I mean, it is very different than the way Marvel started. Marvel started with Iron Man.
Yeah.
Iron Man was the first hero. Now, granted, going back with Captain America and kind of the little bit of fleshing out you get
Sure.
with Agent Carter and things like that, but
Right.
realistically, Iron Man feels like the first hero. Superman is not even the first hero, even though he is established to be a big hero, he is
Yes.
nowhere near the first.
Right. And well, and because technically, if you really want to be honest about it, the first hero of this universe is technically on a somewhat, scale level. It's Peacemaker. If you're technically being on, like,
Well, I'm
not
talking
timeline wise, but like,
chronologically.
right. I'm not talking timeline wise. I'm talking like, okay, because technically Peacemaker season one is canon, except that one
Mhm.
scene. Peacemaker would be the Iron Man of the universe, which I doubt they're going to do that. That would be
No,
really weird.
no. I think
um,
I think Peacemaker, he has a cameo in this movie
yes,
as I think
yes,
was very necessary as and I don't think it felt forced, but I think it was very
no,
necessary to establish like if anyone had any questions about whether Peacemaker was canon in the DC universe, James Gunn needed to answer it and he did it in the
yes,
best way possible. A 5-second scene of John Cena giving an interview talking about Superman. That will
yes.
maybe be referenced, actually almost definitely be referenced in the upcoming Peacemaker.
Well, I know it will because I got another thought that kind of pertains to it. But we know that Frank Grillo, who's in this movie, plays Rick Flag Sr.
Yep,
Uh, we know he plays
and
a
he is in
massive part.
Peacemaker.
He's playing. I don't know if he's the villain or if he's just a villain, but is an antagonistic force for Peacemaker
Yeah, I
in
was
the
gonna say
second
I'd put
season.
him more as an antagonist than a villain per se. Lex
Yes.
Luthor is a villain, and that's another one.
Yes.
Perfect casting. Nicholas Holt, as Carson said, we actually got to see him at MegaCon do a panel, and he talked as much as he could about Superman. Amazing. I will
Yeah.
say I have my problems with the way that his story ended, but we'll get into that when we get there.
Right.
Because I think overall, the way that they introduce him, with him giving the codes on how to beat Superman, I love that that's the style of Lex Luthor that he is. That he is
Yes.
so unbelievably obsessed with Superman because that's who Lex Luthor is. He is
Yes.
obsessed with Superman to a point in which he has his fighting styles memorized. He knows how to counter Superman. I mean, a big plot point that they have is brains over brawn. He is
Yeah.
that brains. He is that person that is so smart that he can defeat the Man of Steel, Superman,
Right. Right.
without with basically just money and his intelligence. And I
Right.
think and I'll bring this up because this is something that is probably people have thought about before, but is something that I think is very topical to the way that this Lex is portrayed is Lex Luthor is a perfect example of if Batman decided to be evil
Yeah.
because they're
Yeah.
very similar very, very similar as people. They are both insanely intelligent. They are both very, very rich. They are both successful business people. They are both extraordinarily charismatic. They are very similar characters. The only difference, the main difference, is that Lex uses his intelligence and money for his version of good, which is defeating Superman and being
Yeah,
anti-hero essentially, and Batman uses it to save the world and be pro.
right,
Ultimately, though, you can look at their goals as being the same. They both want to help people to a degree,
right,
but in a very
right.
different way.
Well, and it's funny you mention that Lex Luthor, is obsessed with Superman, and how he could basically, like, Batman and him are similar in certain ways. This that That's what I really wanted. This is a mini rant about Batman v Superman, but that's what I wanted the plot of Batman v Superman to kind of be about in some regard. I don't know what it fully would entail, but I liked the idea, especially when they announced a Lex Luthor for that movie. The idea of Batman is obsessed with Superman, Lex Luthor is obsessed with Superman, but we get a parallel of both of them being so obsessed with Superman. Maybe Lex Luthor uses Batman to take out Superman, but Batman
Yeah.
realizing that I can't be obsessed with him. Like, maybe I don't 100% trust him because he is an alien. But if I stick with this obsession, I'm going to end up exactly like that guy over there who will stop at nothing, doesn't care who gets hurt to kill this alien god being from outer space. Um, so it's really funny you bring that up because I thought about that a lot actually after finishing this film. But no, I love Nicholas Hoult in this role. I loved him as Beast. Not saying I didn't. My God, this is a much better performance. Holy
Yeah.
crap, very
Yeah.
different. And the thing I wanted to talk about earlier, and I know you'll agree with me. One of James Gunn's specialty, and technically he did this with the entire Guardians crew, is he's really good at taking characters that we've never heard of and making them popular household IP names. And what I mean by that is, of all the Green Lanterns, Guy Gardner's not, unless you've read the comics, Guy Gardner's not one that people are going to have heard of. You may have
I
heard
think
of
what is
Hawkman,
Hal Jordan would probably be the biggest and most
Hal
popular
Jordan,
of the
or John Stewart, one of the two. Guy Gardner's not one that you would have necessarily heard of before those two. You definitely would not have heard so much of Hawk Girl, but maybe Hawkman, even though Hawk
Unless
Girl
you
is like
watched the CW TV series,
right.
yeah, Hawk Girl is very it's same for Mr. Terrific. Mr. Terrific is
Yes.
very, very different in the CW show. I actually love him a lot more in here as a big CW
Yes.
show shill.
Yes.
Again, I think Mr. Terrific was a absolute standout. He was every scene he was in, he was a scene stealer. He had some of the best comedic beats. As a character, I think he was just exactly Mr. Terrific is there's a lot of very smart, very rich characters in the DCU. And I think that is again one of my complaints about the DC universe is a lot of their
Sure.
heroes are just very smart and very rich.
Right.
Going up against gods. Now again,
Right.
Marvel does have some of those, but it is to a lesser degree in my opinion, Iron Man being the biggest of
Right.
that category. Mr. Terrific is another one of those examples, but I think his moral compass and the way that he is I think it's again, it has a lot to do with the way that he's acted, but it is his subtle differences to a
Yeah.
character like Batman and the way that he chooses to utilize his intelligence and his money that
Right.
really sells me on him.
It's I'm saying that as like a point of James Gunn does a really good job just taking the smaller characters and giving them life and giving like this is why I think he actually is perfect for bringing the DC universe back in a newer fashion, purely because he's going to make it so well thought through and put together. Even if they're not the most well thought out characters, they'll have something about them that you like. Like Mr. Terrific is not going to be anybody's favorite character. He's not going to be like Lex Luthor. He's not going to be Superman. And when Batman comes in, he's obviously not going to be Batman. But
Mm,
you will know who Mr. Terrific is, and you'll care about Mr. Terrific because James Gunn gave you something to care about with that.
yeah.
Um, he just does such a fantastic job with that. Um, Here is my 2 cents, and this is another complaint I have. And it's weird because technically they're the brawn to Lex Luthor's brain. Lex Luthor's clearly the villain, but
Yeah.
the way they use Ultraman, and I don't even know what the other kid's name or the other girl's name is.
Not Eve Tessmacher. Are you talking about the engineer?
Yeah, engineer. Thank you.
Mhm.
It's those two. They're technically the brawn to Lex Luthor's brain. I wish they would
Yes.
have done something a little more with her. Not so much Ultraman. Ultraman kind of, you got the point across. He's a clone who is brainless and takes orders. That makes sense. But she had an idea that was actually kind of interesting, where it's like she technically was in control. Like Lex Luthor was
Mhm.
telling her what to do, but she could have chosen anything and could have done anything. I would have
Yeah.
liked to have seen more with her. Again, all my complaints here are things that I'm just like, oh, I wish they would have done that. But what they did is perfectly fine. I'm not going to be completely upset over it. I do think that that's something that they missed, or they could have added.
And
Uh,
I wa I was gonna wait to bring this up until later, but since I don't know if we're even gonna go back to the beat for beat going through the movie at this point because 'cause we're kinda just
no,
going off about our thoughts
no.
on the movie, which is how we feel more comfortable talking about it anyway. Since you
Yeah,
brought it up, another one of my critiques, I'm not gonna call this one a complaint, one of my critiques is having Ultraman in this movie being a clone of Superman. First of all, I called it immediately. I called it from the trailers. And now granted I'm not unique in that, but especially the second that
sure,
they get into the Fortress of Solitude, I think anyone with a brain can figure out what's going on, that knows anything
sure,
about comic books. I was like, "Oh yeah." Like I knew that they were going to do it beforehand, especially once you saw like the Hammer Bravey, like all that stuff. The second they get
sure,
into the Fortress of Solitude was my like, there's if they do absolutely anything else about this being at least a variant or something of the sorts,
sure,
then I don't know what they're gonna do. It'd be insane.
sure,
Um,
right,
I wish that they didn't go the clone route. I feel like he was underutilized and kind of overshadowed. I feel like the reveal meant nothing. I felt nothing for the reveal, and I feel like I should have felt something, if that makes sense. I'm sitting there watching this reveal happen, and I don't think anyone in my theater was surprised. And again, maybe that's not what they were going for, but with a reveal like that that's been hidden for most of the movie, I wanted to feel something. The reason I say that is because if you're going to do another version of Superman, make it bizarro. Make it something a little
So
bit more
yes,
unique.
I'm so glad you
Like,
said that.
making it just be a clone of Superman, "Oh, I found a piece of your hair and he's stupid." That you literally just described Bizarro, except Bizarro is a little bit different. He is a stupider version of Superman.
Well, they
Why not
even
just
make it a.
go pale his skin, something like that, make him Bizarro? I would
I
have
That's
been way happy
exactly.
if that was the reveal than just it being a stereotypical clone with longer hair.
I know. I wouldn't be surprised if they want to save Bizarro. I would not be surprised because Bizarro
And
is a
maybe
big
after
character.
maybe he comes back from the black hole and he becomes Bizarro, and that is what becomes Bizarro. I'd be more
Right.
okay with that. But for them not making him Bizarro right off the bat, I was not a big fan of. I'm just
Well,
gonna
that because that was a thought. I literally leaned over to my friend. It wasn't immediately, but it was like whenever Ultraman, I think, was in the football stadium before he got revealed. I
Mhm.
leaned over to my friend and went, how much do you want to bet that it's Bizarro under the mask? Like it is a clone of this version of Superman, but it's because Lex doesn't know exactly how to clone. Like he's a smart man, but not everything can be so perfect. And because he's technically dumb, you rip it off. He's got pale skin, cracks everywhere. It's Bizarro, and he's
Yeah.
taking orders from Lex Luthor until what something snaps and Bizarro's finally free on his own power or whatever.
Mm.
I also understand why they didn't do that though, because like I wanted that. I called it immediately. There were two things I was thinking that could happen. One of which I really would have hated, but it would have been really fun to see, which was Henry Cavill takes off the mask and he's Ultraman, which I would have hated. Second thing would have been Bizarro. Um, the Bizarro thing, I feel like people could have easily gotten upset over because, again, Bizarro is a bigger character, and if you reveal him at the end of the movie to be Ultraman, and then immediately kill him off by going into a black hole or kill him off, I
Mhm.
could have easily seen people getting upset over that. So I also
Yeah, and I
understand
think
that.
that's valid. Yeah, I think
Um,
that's valid. If this is the way that they ended wanted to end the movie, then I would have rather not be Bizarro, because I don't want Bizarro to just be killed off in 2 seconds. Because who knows if this version of Ultraman's ever going to come back? I mean, he was sucked into a black hole, but that's doesn't necessarily mean he's dead, because we didn't see his head get like, even getting your head cut off
sure.
doesn't mean you're dead nowadays. Like, you never know.
Right. Well,
Um,
and I don't know. And the way James Gunn tells this story specifically, if you look at it objectively from start to finish, even though it is, there's a lot happening at once. I'm not saying it's bloated, even though you might feel like that at times. It is very simple. Like it's not like it's trying to overtell
yeah.
something. It has a very simple message behind it, and the plot is honestly the plot. This is what I love about this plot is that it doesn't feel like a Superman punch action, let's stop the bad guy thing, even though it can be at times. It's about Clark Kent, and it's about
See,
him.
I'm gonna stop you there because I kind of disagree a little bit. And this is another one of this is again, it's a critique, it's not a complaint, it's the style of movie they wanted to tell. It just subverted my expectations a little bit. To me, watching this was a Superman movie. It was Superman through and through. Even the moments where you can make an argument that it was Clark Kent, it was still Superman making those discoveries. And we got 2 scenes with Clark Kent in this entire movie. We got the scene where he goes back to his parents, and we got that scene in the beginning where he's at the Daily Planet. Those are the only 2 scenes that I can remember where we got Clark Kent. Every other time he was in his Superman outfit. Even if he was acting as Clark Kent, he was still in the Superman outfit. I mean, think back to when he's having that heart to heart with Lois with the whole imp in the background, which is
Sure,
another
yeah,
scene I
yeah,
want to
yeah,
talk
yeah, yeah.
about because I have my thoughts on that scene. He is in his Superman outfit and he is Superman finding these things out. I do wish that we got again, this is the style of movie that James Gunn sought out to tell. He wanted to tell a Superman movie, and I think that is totally fine. It's just I'm bringing this up because I disagree that this was a Clark Kent movie because
And
I
I
saw it as fully
disagree.
a Superman movie.
Well, and I disagree. I don't see this as a full Superman movie. And honestly, this is what I love because this is the exact same conversation I had with my 4 friends when I saw this in theaters. 2 of us said this was a Clark Kent movie. 2 of us said it was a Superman movie. This is what I love about it. It's so divisive and nobody actually knows, but that's what's so interesting about it. I believe this is a Clark Kent movie purely because of everything that it builds towards. It's Clark's inner turmoil of who am I? Who am I supposed to be if my parents have actually told me like I was sent here to conquer, to basically be an Omni-Man figure, a literal Omni-Man figure.
Yeah.
It's his inner turmoil and coming over that. Yes, it has the big action sequences. Yes, he's in a Superman costume, but he isn't Superman when he's talking to Lois. He definitely isn't Superman when he's talking to his parents, even though he's in the costume. The whole struggle of this entire film is him coming to terms with who he is and realizing that you know he makes the choice on who he is. You're not defined by your parents, which is what obviously Pa Kent was saying. What
Mhm.
Jonathan Kent? Is it Jonathan Kent? Is that his first name is Jonathan?
Yeah,
I can remember if it was
if I'm
Jonathan
not
Kent or
mistaken.
not. Obviously, we know the
Um,
mom's name is Martha.
well, and, and so here's the thing, and this is going to sound like the most semantic asshole thing to say in the world because it is. It really is. This is probably the
From
most
you, what?
shut up. This is probably the most nitpicky thing I will ever say on this podcast. If you want to make the argument that this is not a Superman movie, I would not say that this is a Clark Kent movie. I would say this is a Kal-El movie. Again, very semantic, very like kind of
Yeah,
hoity-toity,
you were right.
opinionated nerd style of talking, and I'm not going to say it isn't. I think that all of what you're talking about with him, the whole realizations and things, which I have a lot of thoughts on. I really want to talk about it because I actually loved a lot of that plot line. I would
Yes.
say if you want to make those arguments, I would agree with it if you had replaced the word Clark Kent with Kal-El, because the whole story of him finding out about his parents and all of that, that's not Clark Kent, that's Kal-El.
That's Kal El. No, okay, yeah, I'll change those words because I agree with you on that. Is it? It's raining outside. Good lord, it just started
You
pouring.
live in Florida, of
Um,
course it's raining.
no, but I agree with you though. I actually like that. It's Kal El's story, not Clark Kent. I really appreciate that.
Yeah.
Something I do also want to bring up, and I'm not like mad about it because I'm sure he probably talked to James Gunn and he was like, I really don't want to do anything, but if you want me to be in the movie as like a bit character, I'll do it. Bradley Cooper as Jor El. I mean,
I did
okay.
not clock that. I'm gonna be totally honest with you. I had to find that out afterwards, but that's mainly
I
because I could the way that their holograms were done, I thought looked very good. I thought the
yes,
effects in this movie overall, with the exception of some of the flight scenes where we got straight on Superman that I wasn't the biggest fan of, I thought the
sure,
effects in this movie, especially when compared to what I've been complaining about with really bad green screens with things like the Jurassic Park movie or Jurassic World movie review
yeah,
last week, I thought the effects in this movie looked fantastic, except for some of those shots.
yes.
But anyways, I did not clock that that was who that was. I had to find out afterwards. I don't even remember if I think it was Koi's review maybe that I was watching where he brought that up and I was like, "Oh, okay, that's who that was."
I just laughed about it because I remember like a year ago reading like a report, and it was multiple people. So I thought, okay, this could be true. Was Bradley Cooper's playing Jor-El? I was like, oh, that's a really cool idea. I completely forgot about it, and I'm like, oh yeah, Bradley Cooper is playing Jor-El. I wonder what they do with him. He says the same thing over and over again. Oh, okay. I like Bradley Cooper,
He
and I like
he he
Jor-El. Can
recorded
we?
he recorded for he spent more time getting into his Jor-El costume than he did recording scenes for this movie.
That's very, very true. Now, he could easily be in Supergirl. There could be a
Yes.
bit with him in Supergirl. I actually would not be surprised if he has a an actual part in Supergirl, depending on where it actually takes place. Supergirl could be a
Well,
prequel on Krypton. We really don't know.
it might
Um,
have it might so it's not a prequel. I think it picks off right where we leave off with Supergirl making a cameo in this movie, from what I understand.
yeah,
However, I would not be surprised, depending on what direction they want to go with Supergirl. And I've heard it's based on Supergirl Woman of Tomorrow, which I might even start reading today, because I really want
yeah,
to read that comic to see where that movie is supposed to go. I want to read more Superman as well, because this has made me appreciate Superman a lot more.
yes, yes,
Again, not my favorite character or anything, but it made me appreciate him more.
sure.
But I would not be surprised if one of the big things with Supergirl is that she is sent to Earth to look after Superman, but
Yes,
something happens in this is one of her renditions, but one of the renditions is she's sent to Earth to look after. She gets there very late. Superman's already grown up and already the hero of this universe. So now she has
yes.
to, instead of looking after him as a baby, her dynamic changes completely. If they have a very similar start to this story, it could be that she gets sent with a recording of his parents as well. That's either different or similar or what have you to the one that Kal-El gets here.
It could be. Um, I don't know. It's just I bring that her up and I bring Jor-El up just because I'm like I feel like they could have done a bit more. They did exactly what they needed to with Jor-El, but again, you
Yeah.
cast Bradley Cooper in the role. We know you're going to use him in some other way. That's not the only time you're going to use him. Secondly, why cast Bradley Cooper if that would be the way you were going to use him? You know, I'm so conflicted about it because I actually like the idea of casting him in that role, but then you use him yes, in the right way to push the plot forward, but then you don't use Bradley Cooper like at all.
I mean,
Like you could have
there's a
thrown
chance
anybody
that
in there.
later down the line, again, he might play a big role in Supergirl. We don't know.
Sure.
This whole and that's why I don't see it as a negative, just because
Yeah.
maybe in this movie he was underutilized, but again, this is setting up a universe, and we already know that
Yes.
the next movie that we're getting is literally his cousin, Superman's cousin. It's
Yeah.
Supergirl. So I'm not down on that. One thing I will say, since we're talking about the whole parent thing, one criticism I've seen of this movie is the switch up for Kal-El's parents, and that is them the whole him starting a harem thing, the taking over the world thing. I've seen some complaints that people don't like that that's the direction that they took with Superman and his parents. I actually really like it. And the reason I
Yes.
really like it is for one scene in particular. And it is admittedly the only scene that got me choked up was the whole dialogue on what you took away from that video says a lot more about you than it does about your parents or anything else. And I
Yes.
that's one of my favorite scenes of the movie, and that's why I loved the way that they took it, because with the Superman that they've set up in this world being so conflicted and having so many problems with the government and all of this and who he is as a Superman,
Right.
um, I loved that that's the direction that they took with his parents. Now, granted, it gets them in a lot of traps of where they can go in the future with his parents and our view on them if they appear in Supergirl or if we get a Krypton series or anything like that. It does very
Sure.
much change our perspective and how you can tell their story going forward. But I think for the context of this movie in particular, I loved that that is the question that gets asked. And that's the
Yes.
perspective that Pa Kent brings of, look, we aren't your birth parents, but and we also don't like we also only can do so much. Like parents aren't there to dictate who you are. Your parents are there to guide you through life. And I
Right.
love that that was the way in the direction that they took Superman story, Pa Kent story, the whole Kent family story, all of
Yes.
the above.
It's it's funny talking about Pa Kent because usually at this point in the story he's already dead.
Yeah.
In Smallville he dies of a heart attack, blah blah blah, certain reasons, and in in Man of Steel he dies to a tornado when Clark totally could have saved him. We had a whole moment in the theater. We were like, "Where's the tornado? There's Pa Kent. Where's the tornado?" We were joking about the death of Kevin Costner's Kent in Man of Steel because it's so weird.
Yeah.
He just turns away, puts his hand up, no, turns away. Like he turns
Yeah.
into the tornado. I'm like, what? Why? I don't know. Sorry, that's a mini rant about Man of Steel and John McCann. Uh, um, no, but like, let's go back quickly because I want to talk about a specific moment with Hawk Girl because I know I had mentioned uh, I know I mentioned like she screamed through most of the movie. You don't have to do a lot with Hawkgirl. They used her in one moment specifically where I thought that's genius. I'm glad they did that, and that's when she kills the president of
Oh yeah, I loved that. I loved that that's the decision that they made because Hawkgirl is a lot less. If you know the backstory of Hawkgirl, which I am actually pretty familiar with, I love Hawkgirl with the whole
yeah,
time loop, with the forever love, with well, not
yes,
time loop, but the reincarnation and
yeah,
things
yeah,
of
yeah,
that
yeah, yeah.
nature. Her being a lot more jaded as a hero and making that decision to kill the president of Botvaria, if I remember correctly, made
Yeah.
up country. I love that. And I thought
Yeah.
that fit very well.
I like that because it also goes to echo like but she specifically says I'm not Superman, and
Yep.
does it, which then echoes Clark later, choosing to spare Lex instead of harming Lex, this, that, whatever. Even though
Mhm.
Crypto goes ahead and does that, which God, that was funny. That was so stupid, but it was so. I didn't expect it. I started laughing because I'm like, why? Just let him go to jail. Why are you throwing him around? It's so.
I'm gonna say something extraordinarily controversial, and I know it's very controversial. I thought the crypto joke was overused. And that
It,
kind of
yeah,
that kind of goes into another bigger criticism for the movie as a whole. And I know this is James Gunn. This is James Gunn's like fault, I guess, for lack of a better term. Um, one of the big complaints with the MCU, and in fact superhero movies in general nowadays, is that they are way too quippy. They use jokes to get out of telling darker stories and
sure.
things of that nature. I thought this movie did a better job than some modern MCU films as to balancing that. I still did not like how quippy some of the moments were in this movie and how forced some of the
Sure.
jokes were. Crypto was one of those that I found very funny in the beginning, and I think it was by the time we get into the teapot or whatever it's called, and he sits on Lois's lap, I did not that was when I was like, "Okay, you've overused the crypto joke. I'm not a big fan of what you just did there." I felt like that was wholly
Sure.
unnecessary. Another moment that I felt like was wholly unnecessary, just dragged on the plot, and I actively was sitting there watching the scene going, "Please let it be over." I think it's the only scene in the movie that I thought that. Ironically enough, also has to do with the teapot, and that was the garage door joke. I hated that garage door joke. I thought it was so stupid. It was
Yeah.
so generic. It was so unnecessary. It was the only scene in the movie that I'm sitting there and I'm like, why is this here? I might have my complaints with other scenes, but I can appreciate them and understand why they're there. That is the only scene in the movie that I'm sitting there going, please let this end.
I thought it was funny, but I was actually like on rewatch. It's gonna hurt rewatchability because I'm not like.
Yeah.
Granted, I feel like there's a lot of James Gunn jokes, and even honestly, the prime character for like jokes that are definitely like gonna not age well. Deadpool is like the prime example of that. Most of Deadpool's jokes, even the first Deadpool, which is almost 10 years ago, it'll be 10 years ago next year, literally is outdated. Most of them will be outdated, or you're not going to really have an idea of what's actually happening. You know, the sorry, we're talking about Marvel here, but I'm just giving an example. The Channing Tatum as Gambit, we know what that is, and especially in 2024, we know what that is because we knew that he was supposed to play Gambit. People will actively have to look that up, or they're not. There's a good chance that in a far from now future, they're never going to know what that means. They're just going to see Channing Tatum. Oh, Channing Tatum was in this. Okay, like they're not even going to care to look it up because they don't know. It's stuff like that. James Gunn also does that every now and again. I don't necessarily hate everything they did with crypto. I'm actually trying to see if there was anything I really didn't like, but for the
Look,
most part,
again,
I
I'm
like what
not
they did with
saying I
crypto.
hated everything that they did with crypto. I actually really enjoyed crypto's involvement in this movie, especially with this scene. Again, another one of my favorite scenes in this movie, more about Superman and Kal-El than it is about
Yes,
crypto necessarily, but that's
sure.
when Lois in Clark or I guess this is an argument where you can make maybe he's Clark in this moment, even though he's still in the Superman outfit. But she has the whole thing of like, oh, you're gonna go back for it's just a dog, and he's like, yeah, and not even a very good one, but he's alone and he's scared. I loved that scene because that is the pinnacle of
Yeah,
Superman. That dialogue, if
yeah,
you wanted to take any line of dialogue from this entire movie, and maybe there's other examples that I'm not thinking of, but for me, that line of dialogue made having crypto in this movie so worth it because it is the definition of who Superman is as a hero, as a person,
right.
as everything.
Well, how
However,
about him?
I still think that the overall joke of crypto being a bad dog, when he had that whole thing in the teapot, I was like, okay, this is just I didn't laugh, I didn't feel anything.
Yeah, I guess that's fair. Um, but you know, I it got a massive laugh out of me whenever we find out where he's captured and Crypto's actually perfectly fine. Like they haven't done anything to him. They just stuck him in the
The
pod and
squirrels.
there's squirrels, but they have capes on. And I'm like, come
Yep.
on, dude.
Super
Like, come
squirrels.
on, man. But speaking of squirrels, that was something I also loved because it does show Superman's character. Superman saving the squirrel. That's such a minor thing, and in a
Oh yeah.
lot of ways, it could be stupid. But that just goes to show how Superman as a character is.
Oh yeah, no, I love
People,
that scene.
animals, all of it. He'll save any of them, and he loves that. Um,
Yeah.
it's very different from Man of Steel, where everybody dies pretty much immediately. Because he goes through buildings with General Zod and everybody dies.
Yeah. I'll bring up one more example, and I'm curious your thoughts on this because I hinted at it previously, and it's I'm bringing it up now because it goes along with my whole use this is actually the prime example of using jokes to bring levity to a situation that I didn't want nor need levity to, and that was having the Justice Gang fighting the imp in the background of a very serious conversation with Lois and in this moment I would make the argument probably Clark. I did not like that. I thought it was very funny. Granted, I did laugh. I can't say that I didn't because I did find it very funny, especially the baseball bat and things like that. However, it was unnecessary because I did personally feel like even as much laughter and enjoyment I got out of it, it distracted and detracted from the emotional heaviness that you're supposed to be feeling in this moment.
I actually didn't feel that at all. Like, yeah, it was in the background. I was not distracted at it at all by it at all. If you were paying more attention to that versus the scene, then you could be distracted. But I thought Gunn did a good enough job to focus the shots on when it was being serious, and then you cut to the background for a quick laugh. It didn't undermine anything though, because it wasn't until the end resolution that it actually worked. And by that point, they're still fighting the creature, but it ends with them both. I don't. I think they're it's the shot from the first trailer where she's holding his arm, they go
Mhm.
in for a kiss, and the colors are behind it. It
Yeah.
builds to something that's really beautiful. I don't actually see it as anything bad because it doesn't end with the funny. The funny's throughout it, sure, and it's not
Mhm.
distracting enough to take you out of the moment. But it keeps building towards it. And honestly, if they had ended with the funny, like if they had ended with Guy Gardner being thrown against the window or like Miss Trivia coming, get your butt out here or something like that. I
Yeah.
don't know. Then it would have crushed it. They didn't end with any laugh, so I actually thought that was perfectly fine. I can see the complaint though, and I'll give you this. If you were distracted by it, I will give you that. But it is certainly not as bad as stomping on a moment by ending it with a joke. They didn't end it with the joke, and they also didn't have a big enough laugh, in my opinion, to warrant distracting it from a dramatic moment. It was just something in the background to, kind of give you a little something.
And I can definitely see that point, and I'm not gonna disagree with you either. I think that if you weren't distracted by it and you didn't feel like it was unnecessary, that's your opinion. I the question that I was asking myself while I was watching the scene, and anytime I ask myself a question when watching a scene, it's not always the best thing because I want to be focused on the movie. But I'm sitting there in the
Sure,
theater and being like, why are they doing this in the background? Do they have
sure,
a not every scene needs to be the most impactful thing. It does not every scene needs to have the best reason to be there. But when I actively ask myself in the scene why something is there and why was this necessary, and I can't come up with a valid reason, that's when I'm like, okay, cool, I get it. Some people are gonna enjoy this. That's totally valid. I'm not gonna say that you can't enjoy this. But for me, if I'm sitting there asking myself, why is this there in the theater? I don't think I'm going to look favorably back on it when I either rewatch this movie or when I think about this movie in
sure,
retrospect.
sure. No, that's fair. I get that. The only other like running on joke that I didn't necessarily agree with, I actually found quite a bit annoying at times, and this is literally the only one where I was like, that okay, yeah, we didn't need that. Was how many times Lex's girlfriend showed up? They could have revealed her
Which
at the
one?
end.
Are you talking about
The one that
Eve
that helps.
Tessmacher or the one in the cube?
Yeah, no, 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 no. Yeah,
Because there's
Eve,
the ex girlfriend in the
the one
cube
that
and then Eve Tessmacher.
the one that loves Jimmy. That's Eve, right?
Eve Tessmacher, yeah.
They definitely could have, you know, made her a bit role in the background, and then at the very end done something with that. It would have been fine. They ran it for way too long because I thought the
I
first scene was funny in the alley with Jimmy. I thought the second time over the phone, I was like, "Oh my god, we don't need this. Just send the stuff, send the stuff, get it over with, then get captured." Beyond, and at the end, you could have done a bit joke. I thought it just was one too many times, and her character. Granted, that's the point of her character. Way too annoying. I get that that's the point of the character, and so you succeeded. Congratulations. But I was like, oh, she's going to be a bigger character, isn't she? Oh, don't do this, please.
This is gonna be an example where instead of you disagreeing with me, I'm gonna disagree with you. I
Yeah,
loved the way that they did Eve Tessmacher's character. I loved that here's the reason why is I loved that her taking selfies in the background, which was could be seen as an annoying joke, became a plot line in the end. And it kind of gives her character some more credence because you can ask yourself, and you can I personally don't think this question was answered at all, and I don't think the answer is obvious of was she doing that because she wanted dirt on Lex, or was she doing that because she's aloof? I personally lean towards the side of she was doing that very strategically to gather dirt. The reason I say that is because in the scenes that we see her taking selfies, she is in it is one of the biggest examples is against the Hammer of Baravia. She moves to specifically take a selfie with the Hammer of
Mm,
Baravia in the background. Now you can make the argument that that's just because she thinks it's cool or whatever, but the fact that she had so many selfies that were so strategically placed, I personally, again, maybe I'm being stupid and looking into it too much, but I like that I'm asking myself the question about her character of did she do that purposefully? I'm not saying
sure,
Eve Tesmont was a genius. I think it is very clear that she is still, to an extent, aloof, and that plays into somewhat of her character a little bit.
sure.
But if we have a reveal later on that she is acting aloof and that she is on Lex's side this whole time and that she's I would actually love that, and I feel like we have gotten all the puzzle pieces to put that together for her to maybe even act as a spy against Jimmy Olsen, who has a connection to the Daily Planet, which has a connection to Superman. I would
Sure.
actually, if that was a reveal that ever happens, I feel like that would be a perfectly set up thing. And if it doesn't, I still enjoyed her character enough to go, she was a good addition. She felt like she was funny. She furthered the plot. I will say when you said ex-girl or when you said girlfriend, the one I thought you were going to talk about was the one in the cube in the pocket dimension. I'm going to say something. This is the most nitpicky of nitpicky complaints, but I thought it when it happened. There's no way in hell her mother was waiting for her at the exact point in which she was getting on that.
No,
There was no way.
no.
That was the reason I say that is because again, minor complaint, unnecessary. We didn't need it. We already had the day saved. Don't throw that in. Don't it,
Hey,
again,
hey, hey.
minor complaint. You can tell me I'm stupid and shouldn't care about it all you want. And ultimately, it does not move my opinion of this movie either direction. But if we're going to talk about it,
That's a nitpick.
it was unnecessary. Like,
I just
you
gotta
took that yeah, I'll leave it there.
I just got a text from James Gunn, and he says that you need to suspend disbelief a little bit there.
Look, we're watching a movie where we have a clone of Superman, and we have Lex Luthor being evil, like, we have all these things, and I'm complete yes, that is valid that it is like I said, I established that it was a stupid complaint. I don't know. I just thought about it because you brought up the whole girlfriend thing, and that was the first thing that popped into mind was, yeah, there's no way in hell her mom would just be waiting there first thing. Like there were so many other people going on in that pocket dimension.
No, that's
But I
fair.
do want to take this opportunity to circle back to our conversation about Nicholas Holt as Lex Luthor because I
Yes.
don't think we've talked about it enough, to be honest, because that
Yeah.
is a huge highlight of this movie for me was Nicholas Holt's performance. I don't think it was a perfect performance. In fact, again, I think towards the end in the way that he was defeated, I wasn't the biggest fan of, but I think throughout the entire course of the movie, the way that he utilizes his smarts, the way that he is performed, it is fantastic. Again, one of the best villain performances that we've had. In especially in DC and honestly, maybe even in general. That I'm gonna save until I do a rewatch because I don't want to jump the gun too much. The James gun. But
Yeah. I knew you were gonna make the joke the moment you said that. I was like, oh, he's gonna say it. Don't you say it.
look, man, if we're gonna watch a quippy superhero movie, I'm gonna make some stupid quips.
No, look, and in all honesty, the moment you said it's fantastic, I almost stopped and, and started quoting Fan Four Stick. I was like, wait, say that again. It's fantastic. Guys,
Also,
I got
Sean
it.
Gunn as Max Lord, love it. I know I'm jumping
Oh,
around a little bit. I'm gonna get back to the
no,
Lex
that's
Luthor thing.
great.
The reveal of Sean Gunn as Maxwell Lord at the end of the movie, love it. I think that's perfect. I think that granted he is already technically a character in the DCU because he is Weasel. However, you don't know that he's Weasel. He could easily play another character, and for that other character to be Maxwell Lord, I love it. Anyways, back to
Yeah.
Lex Luthor, unless you have anything to say about the 2 seconds we got of Maxwell Lord.
No, I don't. Let's talk about Lex Luthor. Can I talk about
Yeah.
a specific moment with him that
Yeah.
I was like, you are just pure evil. That was the moment he played Russian roulette with the one guy, and with
Oh
two
my
bullets in kills him.
god.
I'm like, why?
When I was watching that
Why?
scene in the theater, I wish I was joking when I said I was wearing the same hat in theaters because whenever I go to movies, I look like a homeless person. I don't think I've ever mentioned that on the podcast before. Whenever I go in, I'll wear ratty shirt, ratty pants, and this hat, and in my headphones when I walk over there. I ripped this hat off my head, jumped out of my seat, mouth agape when that happened, and it was one of my favorite Lex scenes in the entire movie because of the line he says after that happens so nonchalantly of, "Oh, I thought that was going to go longer." He has zero fucks to give. He is purely evil. Well, here's the thing. He is purely mission driven.
Yes.
I'm not even going to say the word evil. He is mission driven and he will do anything to achieve that mission. Whether it's good, bad, ugly, whatever, he will do it. And that scene and that line after he kills the, I believe he was a falafel vendor,
Yeah.
is the perfect example of what makes Nicholas Holt's Lex so exceptional. It is the
Yes.
way that it is not just the line, it is how nonchalantly that line is delivered. Of, oh, I
Yes.
thought that was gonna go longer. And you're like,
Well,
oh, you're like crazy, like you're obsessed. Like you will do anything to take down Superman.
it's also such a little thing. I feel like even Lex is smart to know, like, hey, these guys genuinely aren't probably gonna do. Like, Clark doesn't say anything about himself. He doesn't say that he's Superman. Doesn't give any information. This, that. He doesn't do any of it. I feel like Lex has to know that no matter what happens, he's never going to find somebody enough to kill Clark Kent or to breach Clark Kent of like, I'm going to tell you all of this. Like,
Mhm.
maybe if he got to Lois, that would have been the line in the
And then
sand.
Clark gives up that information because you also have the line afterwards, and now granted he doesn't know what Lois is to Superman. He does have the line immediately after he delivers one of my favorite lines in the movie of, "Oh, we have to go get another one. Maybe we'll go after that reporter that you're always talking to, Clark Kent."
Yeah.
Which was very funny.
Yes.
Um because he has no, and it proves that he has no idea who he is. And I
Yeah.
think that is very interesting because obviously Lex Luthor defeated, going to come back. There's no way in hell he's not going to. I'm very curious to see how they do that.
Yeah.
Um because this to me felt like a very conclusive ending to Lex's story. It didn't leave a lot of room open because they completely demolished his public opinion. However, that wouldn't be the first time we've seen that happen. I think one of the biggest examples is Kingpin in
Yes.
Daredevil and things of
Yeah.
that nature, being a villain who is ultimately completely defeated and yet still somehow comes back in a way that makes sense.
He's literally the mayor in Born Again. How do
Yeah,
you
and
get to
Lex
that
Luthor
point?
becomes president, like, that is what we're talking about here.
Yes.
So I'm very curious to see where they go with that. I would love to see a Nicholas Hoult Lex Luthor as president. I think that would be a phenomenal story to tell. I think he would do a phenomenal job with that storyline.
Right. And I don't
Um
think they're just gonna drop off Lex Luthor. He will be a
Oh,
part of
absolutely. You
whatever
do not get
plot.
Nicholas Hoult to play Lex Luthor and have him play him that well to never see Lex Luthor again.
I wouldn't be surprised if the next fight is like General Zod, because I've kind of, like James Gunn's already said that the next Superman sequel is not necessarily going to be a direct Superman sequel. Superman will
I
be
was
in it, but
thinking Brainiac,
Bra-
personally. I'd love to see
Brainiac would be a good
Brainiac.
one.
That's
I
just a
will.
personal thing of wanting to see Brainiac.
It's a because here's my thought. The idea, this is leaning towards the future. We're kind of not talking about Superman, but here's my prediction for what they're going to do, especially with Lex, because they have to get Lex back on the good side of the world. And that's how do we show what is potentially the dark side of Clark Kent or Superman without actually showing the dark side of Superman? You bring in another otherworldly presence who is about as powerful or is as powerful as Superman, who is pure evil. General Zod would fit that very well. Or Brainiac, I could also, now that you mention that, Brainiac also would very well fit that.
Well,
You at least need something that gets Lex out of prison and that gets Lex into a position of power again to where maybe he even helps Superman. which leads to, oh, your name is Clark Kent. You're Clark Kent. I know that now. I will hold
Well,
that
and
over your
and
head.
I know I said Brainiac, but honestly, you mentioning General Zod, which I didn't even think of for some reason, I think makes more sense because who better to first of all, Brainiac, very different villain than Lex. Yes,
Yes.
understand that I know that before I say this next line.
Yes.
If the next villain was Brainiac, if not done properly, would just feel like they're doing Lex Luthor again because Brainiac's
Yeah.
whole thing is that he's super intelligent. If you brought in a General Zod as the villain, first of all, it would give more credence to Lex Luthor's argument of alien, bad alien, because that's
Yes.
exactly what General Zod is. But it would also give a very different style of threat to Superman than just fighting another intelligent creature again, with that being Brainiac. If you
Yes.
General
Yeah.
it would feel like a very different it would feel more like with Ultraman how it's more of a strength battle than it is a smarts battle, which is what they would need to do to try and spin things up to not just feel like you're repeating the same story. Now, granted, if you do
Yeah.
General Zod, a big problem that you're going to have is trying not to retread on the storyline of the Kryptonians again, which you covered here with them being the whole evil thing. I still think
Right.
though you can do that a lot easier without making it feel repetitive than you could do immediately jumping to a Brainiac. Brainiac's maybe Superman 3, or maybe even in a different villain. He's not necessarily
Or
just a Superman villain.
we James Gunn did announce that they are currently in early stages to work on a Justice League movie. There is a truck moving outside my house that just
I
zoomed
can
on by. Um, he's working on a Justice League movie. Brainiac would also be a very good option for a Justice League movie, because that would be a big enough threat that would bring all of the people together for Justice League. Um, and I think in regards to Zod, another thing that I thought of, and I honestly just thought about this, was they could. Again, I haven't read Woman of Tomorrow. I don't know who the bad guy is. Is it Lobo? Is Lobo the bad guy?
I know Lobo is going to appear in Woman of Tomorrow. That is confirmed with Jason Momoa. I don't know
Yeah,
if he's the villain though, because Lobo is a very unique character in the sense of he is well, not unique, but he's an anti-hero more than he is a villain because he is a bounty hunter,
yeah.
and bounty hunters almost always fall into that gray area when they're used more than just as a throwaway. If you ever dive deeper into bounty hunters, I always feel like it's a lot more of an interesting dialogue on like good versus evil morality type of thing. I
Well,
hope that's
because
the direction they go with,
yeah.
but yeah, anyways.
Well, because my thought process is, what if they did Zod in Supergirl, Woman of Tomorrow, and instead of Zod coming immediately, like Zod is the main villain, but Lobo's an antagonistic force who was sent by Zod to take care of Supergirl, so Zod did not have to do it right away, or so Zod only had to deal with Clark. He doesn't have to deal with both Kryptonians who are very, very powerful. Zod would have a massive friggin' army. Um, the issue is, especially with Zod, is that he's already been done twice. Both times he was done fairly well. I can't remember who plays Zod in the original Christopher Reeve Superman, but I know Michael Shannon plays him in Man of Steel. Both times done pretty well. I don't really think Man of Steel is anything exceptional. That
He
original
was done
Superman film is a
serviceably.
classic, but he was done serviceably. I think that's one of the plots you could do again. You just have to change it up so it's not constantly. It's not the entire thing about, oh, they're coming to take over. Even though that's literally
Yeah.
the whole point of General Zod's character. You have to find something new to bring to the table in order to get that
Mhm.
point. And I think doing it in Supergirl would not be the worst idea. Um, that because again, that also would set up the idea of uh, Lex could be free by the time we get another Superman movie. Lex could already be out because this and that, or oh, General Zod came in. That's really powerful. That's the evil side of Superman. Lex, you're on the right path here. We're gonna let you out, just because
Yeah,
you
that's
might
the
have
proof
something.
that I need to
I,
feign my innocence. Yeah.
right? It's crazy. I don't even know if that would be an idea. This is all speculation and prediction. I have no idea what they could do with this. I just am like spitballing ideas. It could be another Superman movie that we get Zod. It could be a Supergirl that we get Zod. Probably it could honestly be the Justice League movie that we get Zod. I heavily doubt that. I would more likely bet money that that would be a Brainiac movie or somebody bigger on that. like not Dark Side would be much later. Um, but it's like
Yeah,
the
Dark Side's
Lantern
too big
show.
to jump into too soon.
But it's like the Lantern show. Are we going to get Sinestro, or are we going to get some other?
Oh,
Uh,
absolutely. I definitely think Sinestro is gonna play a part. Maybe he's not the main villain, but I think there's no
right,
way you're gonna make an entire Green Lantern TV show and not have one
and
of the
not have
pivotal
Sinestro.
antagonists of the Green Lantern core being
Right.
Sinestro. Because
Is it
here's the other thing. It's not the show isn't called Green Lantern. The show is called Lanterns. There
right?
are a lot of different lantern cores, and I have a speculation that while we are going to focus on the Green Lanterns, obviously, we're going to get a lot more than just the Green Lanterns in this show.
Right.
Um, but that's
Well,
jumping
and
to a different show. I think jumping back to Superman with
yes,
Lex Luthor being the villain, not speculating on his future. Again, I think that him I love and again, I know I said I had a problem with the way that this movie ended, and I'll get into the specifics of that. That has less to do with Nicholas Hoult and more to do with other things. Um,
sure.
I love the scene towards the end when he's giving the instructions to Ultraman, where he is all holds bar is gone. He is no longer
Yeah.
putting on the facade that he has very clearly put up this entire movie, and he is letting the actual pure rage that flows through him and he's giving the
Out.
instructions to Ultraman, and he's going, I believe it's, if I remember correctly, it's 1A, 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 which essentially just sucker punch the hell out of Superman because he no longer
Yeah.
cares about strategy. He just needs, not once, needs Superman to be defeated as quickly as possible. And I
Right.
love that you see him be, I don't want to say calm and collected because he's not throughout the entire movie, but you see him be generally very strategic and that whole like one step ahead, two steps ahead type of thing. And then he breaks. And I love
Yeah.
that we got to see that. And I love Nicholas Holt's performance and the pure rage that he feels. I
I
do
yes.
also, as quippy as it was and as comedic as it was, again, this is one of those exceptions to the rule of quippiness being used to, I guess, add levity to a situation, was the
Sure.
scene with the pencil cup, with
Yeah.
him knocking it down and then telling his servants to pick it up again, or his assistants, basically servants, to pick it up again and then knocking it down again. That again leans into the side of Lex Luthor that is there of the pettiness. He can say he's
Right.
doing this for whatever reason he wants, and then he has that whole dialogue about
No.
Galileo and
No. No. No.
Einstein and things like that. And it
Right.
all ties back into what's really driving him, and that's the pettiness, because he is not going
The
to be looked upon the same way that all of these people are. And he needs to be,
right.
wants to be, he feels like he deserves and needs to be looked upon like those people. And he envies
Sure.
Superman because in the short time he's been on Earth, he views him as already being seen as one of those, like, I
Right.
guess, cemented in history characters that he wants to be or needs to be.
Um. I guess talking about another ending to a character, or I guess a beginning. I don't exactly remember what was said, and I don't know if that's just because I was tired and I couldn't hear what was being said. I think I understood what it was being said. But the final scene with Rick Flag Sr. built up so much hype for Peacemaker, and I'm only saying this because I
Mhm.
think the line was it was about Superman, and it was like his friend. Do you remember what his friend said? He like leaned over to
It
him and
was
said something
something
about
along the lines, I know what you're talking about, and it was honestly hard to hear, for me as well, so I think it might have just been an audio thing or a theater thing. Um, but it was something along the lines of basically him being tired, or I guess reprehensive, about all of the superpowered beings in the world. And I think it was, I can't remember if it was Rick Flag or his friend, but one of them mentioned like, "Oh, well, you're gonna have to get used to it because we're stuck with them," essentially. Like that's what I remember
right.
of that
Oh,
scene.
well, it's something I love about that scene and him saying that line. It's something along those lines. Was you can tell in that moment he is thinking about Peacemaker, about how they are that the world has just let these vigilantes run rampant. I don't know fully what Rick Flag Senior's character is in the Peacemaker comics or even in the comics in general. I don't fully know. I don't know
Mhm.
if he is really supposed to be like a big antagonistic role, even though he is going to be an antagonist. You know, it's they set up this idea, especially with that line specifically. When you literally see it on his face, you can tell exactly what he's thinking about if you know that Rick Flag, his son, is dead and was killed by Peacemaker. If you know
Mhm.
that, you can see it in his face that he like does not like vigilantes. He really
Yeah.
doesn't like it. Um,
Well, and I
it's
feel
such a
like
minor
Rick
thing, and
Flag.
I might be adding that, but it's just that's what I gleaned from it because I could tell
Well,
based on his facial reaction. I was like, that he's clearly thinking about that.
I thought something very similar. I don't think you're very off base with that. I did think, like, knowing that he's going to appear. I think if you didn't know that he was going to appear in Peacemaker, it's still a good scene. It still sets things up, but you don't get that additional context. I think knowing that he plays a pivotal role in Peacemaker, and also, I guess, questioning the timeline a little bit, but I'm pretty sure this takes place chronologically after Creature Commandos, which is another
Yes,
instance of him dealing with superpowered beings. I think his role right now is being set up to be an Amanda Waller type character, which, again,
yes,
I don't know if that's how he is in the comics, but that's how he feels right now. Is not that he is, but it feels like he's becoming an Amanda Waller type character.
yes, yes. I agree with that. Um, yeah. I mean, look, I'm gonna wrap up my final thoughts on this whole film because I really did enjoy this film. I can't wait to see it tomorrow. Look, the acting is outstanding. James Gunn did a phenomenal job writing. I know I already mentioned like almost all the Lois and Clark scenes, but all of them are so well done. You feel the dynamic of the relationship. Nicholas Hoult is diabolically evil. He is very subtle in the beginning and then just lets loose in the end. You see the rage, you see the envy, the pettiness of Lex Luthor come out. It's very beautifully done. Um, Crypto, I love Crypto. I thought they did a great job with that. Just addition because that's very hard to handle. Um, the plot, you know, whereas it took me a minute to get into it, the idea of just thrusting us into this, no origin story, no backstory, this being a story of finding out who you are in the sense of Kal-El, very, very smart play on James Gunn's part. Justice Gang, fine. They did exactly what they're supposed to do. I can't really complain because they were in the movie and did exactly what they're supposed to do in the movie, even though you really could have done a little more development for at least maybe even Hot Girl, just to give something. Um, Jimmy Olsen was great. The Daily Planet was all really good. The visuals were really nice. For a Superman movie, even though like CGI is good, even though the CGI is it's hard to do CGI for a Superman movie because he's constantly flying around. He's
I mean,
constantly
yeah,
using
I
laser
think
vision.
I think the only weak CGI I already mentioned was those face-on scenes of him flying. They felt a little off to me. I don't know if that was the effects or just the way that the scene was done.
Sure,
But yeah.
but
Well,
as
and
a whole,
I'm gonna.
this film is a fantastic start to
Mhm.
a new universe or a fresh start for DC. Um, it makes me excited to see more Superman, which Superman's not my favorite character. I know he's not your favorite character. We like Superman, but he's definitely nowhere near anybody's top favorite. This makes me excited and shoot Superman way up. I actually also will make this comment before I let you speak. Uh, this it's really ironic. I did my top five thus far ranking on Wednesday for for 2025 because Superman. I even made the joke of, oh, things could change. You know, some of these films really on there. No, Superman shot immediately up there into the list. It is
Where
up
would
there
you
and
put
it
it?
deserves.
I'm
I
curious.
haven't
Where would you
officially.
put it?
I haven't officially decided. I would probably put it at number three though.
Okay. See, I'm gonna hold off on if I had to rank this movie, like give it a number score, which I know we never do. Actually, no, I'm not going to because I like that we don't give these movies number scores.
Yeah,
But what I will say is I am going to need to wait until I see this movie again before I can even think about putting it in a
sure.
hierarchy. Because personally, this year has been a stacked year for movies that I've seen, and I still haven't even seen Novocaine. I'm probably going to watch Novocaine while I eat lunch because I really want to see that
Sure.
movie. There's a lot of movies I haven't seen, but this movie's been stacked. I mean, we've had F1, as I mentioned, my movie of the year when I had seen it. K-pop Demon Hunters, probably my third favorite if I had to rank it without taking Superman into consideration. Thunderbolt, probably my number two. Like there has been a stacked year for movies. We're about to get my personally most anticipated movie of the year over Superman, Fantastic Four.
Yeah.
Like this is a stacked year of movies. So I want to give this one time and wait until I see it a second time before I officially give it a ranking. I will say though, it is easily top 10, for sure top 10 movies of the
Mm,
year.
mm.
There's no question that it will land in my top 10 at the end of the year, unless for whatever reason we get an unbelievable stack of movies that I can't even think of right now.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, I before I get my final thoughts, I do want to make sure I circle back because I never got into specifics, and I do want to mention because I said that I would, and I want to make sure I do on why I didn't like the way that Superman or the way that Lex's story ended. Um,
Oh yeah. Yeah, yeah.
I have no problem with the whole crypto thing. Again, I it was still like the whole quippy whatever, but I didn't have a huge problem with it. I hated the way that it was shot. It actively made me not enjoy the scene as much as I wanted to because I felt the camera angles that they chose and the cinematography surrounding him being attacked by crypto was very messy. Again, you
Sure.
can take that as a minor complaint, but I do think it is a valid one in my opinion for what I wanted out of that. I felt like they zoomed in on his face. It was very ragged and all over the place. I get that that's what happens when you're defeated by a dog. I still feel like it was done pretty messy, and the way that Nicholas Hoult acted in that scene was the weakest performance that he gave in the entire movie was when he was being attacked by the imaginary dog, and I think that a large part of that is because of the way that they chose to shoot that scene. That is the only thing that marks it down from, in my opinion, what was a very perfect performance from Lex is just that scene. Again, you can view me as nitpicky all you want. I just wanted to voice that because that is the only scene with him specifically that I was like, okay, this is taking me out of this a little bit because it is a very big scene with a lot of connotations with the dialogue between Lex Luthor and Superman and that honesty that Lex finally brings to the table where he finally basically admits that he just wants to defeat Superman. He's not he like there's less logic behind it, which makes sense for the way that they take his character, and more of a just need to defeat Superman. And then, I don't know, immediately following that up with how he's defeated took me out of it a little bit. That's just my personal take on it. I think
Sure.
other than that, I guess I have so much more that I could say on this movie. Again, I loved all the performances. I think Jimmy Olsen surprise hit for me. I think Mr. Terrific surprise hit for me. We didn't even talk about Mr. Terrific all that much. One character that we literally have not mentioned this entire movie, that I wouldn't say was a standout hit, but I did enjoy every scene that he was in was Metamorpho.
Metamorpho. Yeah.
Metamorpho, I thought did a really good job. I'm very excited to see where he goes. I think his power set is very interesting.
Mm.
Um, I don't think he was necessarily an exceptional standout. I thought he did a very good job. That he
But a
was
nice addition.
necessary and played his part well.
A nice
Um,
addition.
it was a nice addition. It was a nice addition to flesh out the world that we have
Yeah.
without feeling like you still don't know how Metamorpho got his powers or much about him. They were just like, oh, Metamorpho's here.
Sure.
He has a kid. We're just gonna run with that. Sorry, I have something in my eye. Things like that I really enjoyed. Um, I'm trying to think of what else, because I don't want to just rehash what I said at the beginning, but what I said in the beginning, I think, is the perfect summation of my thoughts. Is this is one of the best like comic book adaptations
Mm,
without being a one for one retelling of a comic book story that I've ever seen. It felt
yeah,
like I was watching a comic book. It
yeah,
is for as exceptional as I think a lot of the MCU is, a lot of their movies to me don't always, even the best ones, don't feel like you are watching a comic book come to life. This felt like the definition of watching a comic book come to life, and I love
yeah,
that about it. It brings its own pitfalls, which again I think is what makes this movie not a perfect movie, but again, you're never going to get a perfect movie. It's definitely up there in terms of superhero movies. In fact, I think probably it is one of the best DC movies. I think that it's really hard to beat The Dark Knight. It
yeah.
really is. I still
Hard to
think that
beat
is
the
over
Batman.
for me. Um, things like that. But I think overall, James Gunn knows what he has and did exactly what he needed to do. But again, not to rehash the point I made in the beginning, he didn't do more with it. Like it did everything it needed to, and typically at the end of that, you had said it did everything it needed to and more. I was missing that and more personally
Sure.
because and this is where again I want my opinions to be my own, but I think kind of funny. I was watching their 3 hour review of this. They did 3 hour review of this movie. One of the points that was brought up that I agree with that I had before watching it, but they contextualized it a lot better than I could have without seeing it, was this movie did not have an it moment. One of the biggest examples that they brought up was like the helicopter scene.
Mm,
From I think it was, I can't remember if it was the original Matt Reeves Superman or which one, but basically what I mean is it didn't have the big, oh my god, this scene specifically is sensational. It
sure.
overall, every shot for shot was really good, but it didn't have that one moment or one standout where you're just sitting there going, "Oh my god, this scene is phenomenal." And I think that is because of the way that this movie is paced and the nonstop nature of this movie is it becomes very difficult to have one moment that is, "Oh my god, this is insane," because you're so focused on telling the moment to moment to moment in a continuous way.
Sure. Yeah.
That's
Mm,
again, that is, you can take that as you will. If you don't have that criticism, that is totally fine. That is just, I heard that and I was like, no, that is, I was thinking that, but that's the best way to contextualize it for me. Um, oh, I know I said I'd have my final thoughts on this, but I have so many thoughts on this movie. I'm going to bring this up again. I don't know if this is a complaint. I don't even know what I think about this. I just think it is a very interesting, the big climax of this movie with the world splitting open and Metropolis being ripped in half was a very big thing to have as your first DC movie. And I say that because granted this is Superman, so of course you have to have a big like world ending, for lack of a better term, threat to even make Superman feel down. But if you think back to a lot of first character introductions, both Marvel and DC, they still have a sense of like containedness, I guess, in the sense of you are going to talk about the ramifications of this to go forward, but you're not going to have like with how the first Avengers is. We still talk about the ramifications of the first Avengers movie to this day because it was an Avengers movie and it needed to have those stakes. You
sure.
have started out your franchise with a ripping Metropolis in half.
Yeah.
Many lives were completely destroyed forever because of
Yes.
that. That was a
Yes.
very bold decision. Again, I'm not saying it's a complaint. I'm just saying it is a very interesting direction to have your first movie in the DC universe go. And I can see that you have thoughts on this, so I'm curious to hear what.
Yeah, I don't think it's a complaint at all. I think it's a positive that they did that because it's the only logical decision. considering we are in a pre-established world with Superman. Superman has been around for 3 years. This is a big, colossal event for him to take on. Especially throughout the movie, we have a big, well, what starts off as a little monster and then goes to be a big monster. We start off with the Ultraman Hammer persona and the Lex bots. We then cut to when Lois and Clark are talking the big sludge monster thing, which is never actually even fully explained what it is. you know,
No, it's a dimensional imp. It is the
dimensional imp.
dimensional imp.
Thank you.
Yeah.
That being said, like that makes a lot of sense because we've already seen the things that Superman can take out. That's great. So we're just gonna throw another thing at him like that? No, we literally start destroying the city that he loves. That makes complete sense to me in the way they handled it. Again, I'm not saying you were saying it's a complaint, but I think that saying it is ballsy. I'll give you that, but I don't think it's
Yeah.
I don't think it's like anything that's like out of the ordinary for the thing they were trying to tell, especially because again, this is an already established Superman. If this was his origin
Mhm.
story, sure, it's kind of a world-ending threat. We are at that world-ending threat by the time we get to this film. So,
Yeah. Well, and again, like I said, I don't necessarily view this as a complaint. I just think it was an interesting decision, and I'm very curious to see how I feel about it on my second watch through. I'm watching this with a friend tomorrow who has not seen this movie yet, so I'll be able to experience his first reactions and get his thoughts for the first time, as well as, I guess, realize my further thoughts on this. And we might even bring this up briefly next week. And if we have additional thoughts we want to share next week after we
mhm,
both have seen this a second time, we might do
sure.
that. Maybe we won't if we don't feel like we have enough to bring up again. Um, but yeah, just to wrap up on a movie that I could talk a lot more on. I want to read Superman comics after watching this, and I am going to read Superman comics after this. Koi, our Lord and Savior, has
All hail
posted a
Supreme
video.
Leader, Pedro.
Correct. We have to every time. Dude, if he ever watches this, which I don't think he ever will, it's gonna be so embarrassing when he sees that. But we're gonna
I'm
continue
gonna send
doing
it.
it. I think it's hilarious.
I'm gonna send it to him
Uh,
personally and just say, "Yep, here you go,
Hey,
Koi.
hey,
Congratulations."
I'm the only one out of the 2 of us that has actually met and spoken to him in person. So, not that I know him personally by any means. But anyways, I am going to read Superman comics. The reason I brought up Koi is because he posted a video about what Superman comics to read. If you enjoyed this video, I'm gonna use that and read some of those comics because
Sure,
I want to understand Superman more, and maybe those will also recontextualize the way that I view this movie. I might even if I feel like I have enough to talk about after reading them, I might even post shorts about my thoughts on those comics. I don't know.
sure.
That's the beauty of the way that we have our content stream set up is we can just talk about what we want to because that's the whole point of doing this. But yeah, overall, very good movie. Did exactly what it needed to, and got me very, very excited to. I was excited to see where James Gunn was going to take the DCU beforehand, but I had nothing to base it off of, unless you count the Suicide Squad and Creature Commandos, which were both good.
Sure.
To me, didn't really feel like they were setting up anything. This
Sure.
very much gets me extremely excited to see where the future of James Gunn's DC universe is going to go.
Right. Yeah. Well, there you go. That's it. Superman. Put a bow on it. We might talk about it later. We might not. You never know. This could be the worst thing ever in a few weeks. We could look back on this and go, wow, we were so off. This is a complete piece of shit. It's garbage. You never know.
Yeah.
Next week, TBD, we have ideas, but we'll keep it as a surprise. You never know what we're going to talk about. We could talk about
Yeah.
50 Shades of Grey
Likely,
for all we know.
likely to be Eddington just because that's what's coming out. We're not doing 50 Shades of Grey. Um,
As I say, he's just going to brush over it. I knew he would. The
yes.
moment I said it, he's going to brush
Um,
over it.
could be Eddington. Maybe I will force Carson at gunpoint to watch the Smurfs movie that looks absolutely
I'm not.
atrocious. Will I?
I'm not
No,
watching
because I
the
don't want to
Smurfs
watch
movie.
that fucking movie.
I
Um,
won't show up to record. I will not show
because
up to
if I make
record.
if I make Carson watch that movie, that means I also have to watch that movie. And I think
Yeah.
there's been maybe one decent Smurf movie ever made, and this does not look like one of them.
But next week, big episode, 20th episode of the Nerdy Nimrods podcast,
mhm.
the big 2-0.
Yep. And I don't know
So
if you
really
knew this,
excited.
Carson. Apparently, and I don't know where this statistic came from, but I've heard it a few times from different podcasts. Only 1% of podcasts make it to 22 episodes. So if we get to 22 episodes, which for us is like 3 weeks from now, we will be technically in the 1% of podcasts.
Amen. Go for 21 and take off. That's what I heard. But yeah, Eddington most likely TBD. We're figuring some things out. I might want to do something special for the 20th, so we might throw something else in Eddington.
Yeah, yeah.
We'll talk about that and
It's
figure that
it's
out. But
it's a nice break period before the week after, which is going to be a huge review, just like this one, where
yes,
we talked for nearly an hour and a half on one topic,
yeah,
being the Fantastic Four, which again, for me, is my most hyped movie of the year, easily.
sure. But with that being said, let's wrap this up, shall we? Brandon, you have any final thoughts, final regards for the audience?
Go watch Superman. I don't know. That's all I really have to say is for all of its flaws that we talked about, all of the good of this movie very much outshines it. And I think I watched this movie in IMAX. I think Carson, you said you're watching it in 4DX tomorrow.
Yeah, I can't wait for the
We have
scenes
to
where
talk.
crypto. I
We
can't wait for
we
the scenes
have to
where
talk
crypto's
about
jumping
Superman's.
around.
Yeah, we have to watch Superman next week just so I can hear your experience of watching it in
Oh,
4DX. I'm watching it in standard, unfortunately, because my friend that I'm seeing it with is cheap. But I watched this in IMAX first. I think this is a must see in IMAX, or I even heard that James Gunn said this is a really good movie to see in 3D. I'm not a big 3D fan. I know Carson isn't a big 3D fan, but all I'm saying is watch this movie in the best format you can because I do think it
yeah,
deserves it.
yeah, I agree with that. All right, well, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, this concludes another episode of the Nerdy Nimrods podcast. If you like what you heard, if you like what you saw, give us a like, give us a follow, subscribe. You can find us on all streaming platforms: Apple Podcast, Amazon Podcast, Spotify, YouTube, anywhere you name it, you can find us. Wow, big reveal. I know, shocking. You can also find us on all social media platforms under @NerdyNimrods. Yeah, and guys, thank you so much for listening. Until next time, stay nerdy.